recently, Vasyl Lomachenko was quoted as saying, "I'm pound for pound number one, and Crawford is second. Third is Canelo." And I'll be honest. I take no issue with Lomachenko regarding himself as the number one pound for pound fighter, because it just so happens that a lot of people out there do.
They do.
And some of the powers that be also regard him in that respect. While myself and the Ring IQ pound for pound list may not have Vasyl Lomachenko ranked at number one, there is an argument there. There is. This is a change of tune from what Vasyl Lomachenko has said in the past and what he's saying here today. He himself used to regard Terence Crawford as the number one pound for pound fighter, whereas now he regards himself as such. And he's got to have that mindset, competing at the level that he is competing, because at minimum what you can say is this is a top 5 guy. At minimum you have to acknowledge that, and those guys have to be of that mindset that they are the best, because that is what they aspire to, work towards, and want to reflect. So I don't got a problem with Vasyl Lomachenko saying that. It's not like if Adrian Broner said it.
You get the fuck out of here.
But you ain't right. You ain't right.
But back to the point. I take no issue with consummate professionals like Vasyl Lomachenko, like Terence Crawford, and like Canelo Alvarez to a lesser extent, considering themselves as the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, because the dedication is there, you understand. And there's an argument. There's an argument for either of those three guys to be ranked at number one. But I will say that currently, none of those guys are ranked in the top spot on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. And many people often ask me about this. They wonder why. Why isn't Vasyl or Terence Crawford or Canelo Alvarez ranked at number one? And it's because, well, a more accomplished guy that is still competing at a high level today is seated at number one. You know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Manny fucking Pacquiao. It's a simple question, folks. It's a simple situation when it comes to the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. The set criteria that we use to measure these fighters is right there. And all these fighters are rated amongst and against each other on this premise with this unit of measure. So every time you ask me about a guy, it becomes a question of, okay, well, who's held more world titles?
Manny.
Who's defended them more times? Who's unified them more times? Who's unseated and defeated more active reigning champions? And whose quality of competition is better overall?
Manny.
Who's more accomplished? Whose overall track record is a reflection of not only who they were, but who they still are today?
Manny.
And in that realm, in that respect, none of these guys can hold a candle to Manny Pacquiao. None of them. Not based on the rules that govern the list. The governing criteria that we use to measure these fighters amongst and against each other. That's why Manny's sitting there, because which one of these guys has fought in more weight classes than Manny?
Which
and
one?
been a champion in more weight classes than Manny?
Which one?
And beaten more active reigning champions than Manny?
Which one?
More first ballot Hall of Famers than Manny?
Which one?
And it's not like we're just talking about stuff that he used to do. He's a world champion today. Christ's sake, he's coming off of beating an undefeated world champion. So it's pretty self-explanatory why Manny is ranked ahead of those guys. Now, for clarification,
Make it clear.
I'm not telling you that I think Manny Pacquiao beats a Terence Crawford, for example. If we're going to refer to anecdotes, our opinions, our predictions, which are not a matter of fact so much as a matter of opinion, as opposed to the list itself, which is strictly
A matter of fact.
limited to matters of fact. When it comes to my anecdotes on what could happen if Manny fought Terence Crawford, for example, I think Terence Crawford would annihilate Manny Pacquiao. I think he would. If that fight were to go down, I'd pick Crawford to win.
Early.
No doubt about it. But here's the thing. That's just my opinion. Reality is they haven't fought. So I can't give Crawford the credit or rate him on that premise for a fight that never happened. The list itself and what it reflects are fights that actually happened, what has actually taken place, matters of fact and outcomes, facts and stats. And it's not a fact that Crawford beats Manny Pacquiao because, well, they never fought. So until such a time as Manny Pacquiao is ejected from the list by either losing a fight or vacating his world title, because lest we forget, this list is only for winners and only for champions that have a world title. They're in possession of one that they are either defending or unifying. Until such a time as Manny's situation changes, he's going to occupy that number one spot. That is, unless one of these guys managed to catch up to his accomplishments. But that could take a very long time, and by that time, Manny might finally be fucking retired. So, that's the rhyme and the reason behind that. Now, just in regards to Terence Crawford and Vasyl Lomachenko, rating those two fighters amongst and against each other, Terence Crawford sits in the number 2 spot because Vasyl Lomachenko has not caught up to this fighter's career accomplishments. He's getting close. He's getting there. Do realize that, this weekend's fight,
for example,
it pits one gold medalist against the other. Now, right now, Vasyl Lomachenko has only ever beaten one Olympic gold medalist in his professional career. That gold medalist is Guillermo Rigondeaux, whereas Terence Crawford has beaten 2 gold medalists in his pro career. Felix Diaz of the Dominican Republic and Yuriorkis Gamboa of Cuba. Those 2 guys, they're both Olympic gold medalists. So Crawford has that on Vasyl Lomachenko. If Vasyl wins this weekend, he will match that, that element,
He'll tie
that unit of measure when it comes to Terence Crawford. But there are still other areas to cover. As it stands, beating Luke Campbell will not add the name of a champion to Vasyl Lomachenko's resume, and that's something that Terence Crawford just so happens to have over him. That Terence Crawford has beaten more active, reigning world champions that actually had a world title for him to win. They were in possession of a world title. We're not talking about former champions. A former champion can be anyone from fucking...
You name them.
Jarrett Hurd to Chop Chop Corley. There's no distinction because that's just talking about what you used to be, and what you are is what we're looking at. Well, Terence Crawford has beaten more active reigning champions than Vasyl Lomachenko.
4-3.
Terence Crawford has beaten 4 active world champions to Vasyl Lomachenko's 3. That is Ricky Burns, the WBO champion at 135. Victor Postol, the WBC champion at 140. Julius Indungo, the IBF and WBA champion at 140. And Jeff Horn, the WBO champion at 147. Whereas in the case of Vasyl Lomachenko, he's beaten 3 champions, Roman Martinez, Jorge Linares, and Jose Pedraza. Those are the 3 champions that he's beat. So he's still got some catching up to do there. If you look at the number of times that these guys have actually held the Ring Magazine title and been the lineal champion in their divisions, in their weight classes, Terence Crawford's been the lineal and Ring Magazine champion 2 more times than Vasyl Lomachenko. He was lineal and Ring Magazine champion at 135 and lineal and Ring Magazine champion at 140 pounds, whereas in the case of Vasyl Lomachenko, this is something he just got to, in beating Jorge Linares. That's the first time that Vasyl Lomachenko has held the Ring Magazine title. And whether or not he's lineal in the division, that's another story. Who knows? Some people are of the opinion that he's got to fight Mikey Garcia to get that lineal title. So this is still another area where Vasyl Lomachenko has some catching up to do. You think about how many times these 2 guys, comparatively, respective of each other, have dished out the first professional losses to what were undefeated fighters, whether they were challengers or champions. Terence Crawford has dished out 7 losses to
Jose Benavidez,
Jeff Horn, Julius Indungo, Victor Postol, Yuriorkis Gamboa, Andrei Klimov, and Brian Cummings. Whereas when we look over at Vasyl Lomachenko and who he's given their first professional loss to, it's a list of 3 guys. 7-3 in favor of Terence Crawford. Vasyl Lomachenko gave Gary Russell his first loss, Nicholas Walters his first loss, and obviously Guillermo Rigondeaux his very first loss. But unlike Terence Crawford, those guys, they weren't champions at the time that Vasyl Lomachenko fought them. Them guys, they didn't have no belts for Loma to win, whereas in the case of Terence Crawford, he gave Victor Postol, WBC champion, his first loss. Jeff Horn, WBO champion, his first loss.
And Indungo.
So whether you're a challenger or a champion, Terence Crawford's likely to take it home with him, put it on the shelf, maybe put some decorative items around it, some porcelain, elephant, stuff like that. The idea here is that Vasyl Lomachenko really does still have catching up to do when it comes to Terence Crawford. So if these are the kinds of things that you use to measure fighters, measure their skills, if this is the unit of measure that you're using to say that one fighter is better than the other, then it's a clear-cut argument. Vasyl Lomachenko still has more catching up to do with Terence Crawford, whether you like it or not. And that's why Crawford is seated at number 2, and Vasyl Lomachenko currently is seated at number 4. Now, if he wins this Saturday and unifies 3 of the 4 titles at his weight, that will gain him some ground on the list. He'll move up from number 4 to number 3. It being that not only has he been a full-fledged world champion in more weight classes than Canelo Alvarez, who sits at number 3. But just as well, he would be currently in possession of more world titles than Canelo. Right now, all Canelo's got is the WBA and the Ring magazine. Whereas Vasyl Lomachenko, he's got the Ring magazine, he's got the WBO, he's got the WBA, and very soon he could have the WBC, the green belt. So that's enough for him to inch past Canelo, but not past Crawford. Because right now, you're just catching up to something that he did already. You know, you're vying to become an undisputed champion in your weight class. Okay, well, Terence Crawford did that already, so you're just trying to catch up to something that he did. That's how it works, that's how it stands, and that's the rhyme and the reason behind why the list is arranged and structured in such a fashion. That both Terence Crawford and Vasyl Lomachenko, they've both been full-fledged world champions in 3 weight classes. That's one more weight class apiece than Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez has only ever been a full-fledged world champion holding the version of a title that can be unified with that of another organization's. He's only ever been a full-fledged world champion in 2 weight classes. That's junior middleweight and middleweight. That trinket he won from Rocky Fielding, that wasn't the full version of the WBA title. Callum Smith had and still has the full version of that title. So, you know, Canelo, he's only ever been a champion in 2 weight classes, whereas Vasyl and Terence Crawford, they've both been champions in 3. But the difference between the 2 is that one of these guys just has a far more robust body of work than the other, and it's for this reason that Vasyl, you know, he still has some catching up to do. I mean, I know you guys might be thinking that it seems very difficult for Vasyl to move past Terence, but guess what? It's supposed to be difficult. We're talking about the best and brightest fighters in the sport of boxing, and what warrants their considerations as such, as pound-for-pound fighters, i.e., it's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to it's supposed to take, big milestones, big year marks, big accomplishments for one guy to move ahead of another guy, because these aren't your atypical champions. These are the best and brightest champions of the champions. The best of the best. Thus, once you're approaching that top 5, that upper echelon, it becomes increasingly difficult to move past another guy. Kind of like how, it'd be really hard, it could take a long time for Terence Crawford to catch up to Manny Pacquiao's accomplishments, short of actually fighting him. That, you'd have to fight him and beat him to take his spot, because in terms of accomplishments, well, it would take you a long time to do what he did. And the same applies to Vasyl Lomachenko in the sense that, look, Vasyl's not that far off. He's not as far from moving past Terence as Terence is to moving past Manny, but better still, he has some catching up to do. And that's the gist of it. Now, you can have your own list that's governed by your own criteria, your own specificities and what they entail. You can do that. But if you're looking at this list and what governs it, this is how it works. Now, just in regards to the upper tier of the Ring IQ pound for pound list, the top 5 guys and what movement we may see before the year is out, in that portion of the list, guess what? Vasyl Lomachenko may just end up moving past Canelo Alvarez this Saturday if he is successful.
If he wins.
But that's not all, folks, because we know what Canelo Alvarez is rumored to be doing next.
Yeah, I know.
Going up to 175 pounds and challenging Sergey Kovalev, the WBO's light heavyweight champion, for his title. If Canelo Alvarez is successful, and if the fight comes off, they make it, and he wins, guess what? That makes Canelo Alvarez, that would make him a 3-division champion, a full-fledged 3-division champion in possession of a world title that can be unified with that of another rival organizations. And given that, Canelo Alvarez has actually beaten more reigning world champions than Vasyl Lomachenko, that could see Canelo thereby moving past Loma. Layman's terms, i.e.,
close race.
Lomachenko might move past Canelo this Saturday, but Canelo may reoccupy that spot before the year is out. If he goes up there, fights, and defeats Sergey Kovalev. It's a situation to where these guys, they're neck to neck with each other. They are. Terence Crawford, Vasyl Lomachenko, Canelo Alvarez. These guys are in a really close race, and every time there's movement in the top 5 bracket, they come that much closer to moving past Terence Crawford. I mean, just imagine a situation to where Canelo Alvarez potentially goes up there to light heavyweight, where he hasn't done a goddamn fucking thing.
Nothing.
He takes on Sergey Kovalev after Sergey has put stood out.
Anthony Yarde.
Undefeated guy at his weight, in defense of his world title. Canelo goes up there, handles him, potentially stops him. What kind of statement Canelo would be making as a result of that? And how, Vasyl Lomachenko, while he may be a 3-division champion, in terms of world champions he's beaten overall, he's falling short of the mark compared to Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez right now is a 2-division champion, but he has in fact beaten more active reigning champions than Loma. It's for this reason that it's a close race. These guys are neck to neck. Canelo has done some things that Vasyl Lomachenko hasn't done, and Vasyl Lomachenko has done some things that Canelo hasn't done. But the closer they bridge the gap, the closer they get them, not only moving past each other, but moving past Terence Crawford, who's running a shortage of opponents, a scarcity of top-level guys to not only maintain that spot, but re-obtain his spot at number 1. And this is the beauty of it, that while this is going on, we're getting good fights. We're getting intriguing situations as boxing fans. So look, I got no complaints that things are competitive between those 3 guys. Because if it is competitive, that means the best guys really are fighting the best guys. As a boxing fan, what more could you ask for?